All right, Tonio. The next topic I would like to talk about is moisture control. If you can give us, explain to everyone the concept and maybe some methods that individuals use and why moisture control is so important because this is the end goal for many people.
Okay, well, if you ask a lot, let's start again. Moisture control is one of the most asked about and
Mm-hmm.
most concerning elements of the pointing procedure to especially to beginners.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to ask about 100 people, you'd get 100 different answers
Hmm.
because there's many ways to go around it, and it's based on experience, trial and error, and there are many factors that will influence the method you will use, particularly
Hmm.
your location, the location of the fight, the type of foul you use, the type of weapon you show in. All of this will play a factor into how you will go about controlling your moisture. Now, I'm from the Philippines, a
Hmm.
very tropical location, and we only fight long knife.
Okay.
So I can only speak to that experience.
Hmm.
And I don't claim to know everything. I don't claim to win all the time,
Right.
but I have some records of success
Right.
that's verified. So I know a bit,
Right.
and hopefully you can take pieces of this interview and form your own opinion, or maybe it will help you find the direction you want to look towards,
Hmm.
experiment towards, find more info,
Hmm.
something like that. But
Right.
when it comes to moisture control, we'll start with, I guess, the history or the what the old timers say,
Right.
what the old timers tell us. So the old timers will tell us if your bird has too much moisture, he's gonna fight sloppy. He's not gonna throw his legs too well, but he can still cut. I don't get that part. They cut
Hmm.
better when they're moist, they say, and they can't take much punishment if they're on the wet or moist side. They're
Right.
heavy. Then you'll say you go to the dry side. If he's too dry, they'll fight very, very fast, but they won't cut a lick, and they'll be able to stay longer because they won't bleed out. That's the cut and paste version. If you read the Grit and Steel or
Hmm.
the Gamecock or
Hmm.
talk to your uncle or your grandfather, they're gonna tell you that.
Right.
And there's no real science behind these things. We just have to trust what they say, and based on experience, it kind of holds true.
Hmm.
Maybe not 100% like it says in the
Right.
writing, but as a basic guideline, it's kind of true,
Hmm.
right? If you load your birds up with moisture, they're going to be very heavy,
Hmm.
and you'll be sluggish and at a disadvantage in the fight.
Okay.
So, me, as a fighter here in the Philippines in the long knife, we tend to dry out the roosters more. At least I do, because I live in a location above sea level, pretty high up,
Mhm.
and we have moisture, we have humidity of about 80% humidity, 90% most of the year. Right now, it's the height of summer. It's like 103 degrees in the daytime, and the humidity is still at 65, 70%.
Mm.
So it's very humid here.
Very humid.
So take that what you will. I mean,
Right.
they're heavy. We will put them in the air conditioning to suck out the moisture.
Hmm.
That's something we were taught by the Americans. Something was copied in the Philippines, and I do that in my pointing. I put them in the air conditioner. And one other thing is, in the Philippines, most of the cockpits are fully air conditioned. We have perfect facilities, cock houses, because it's a legal activity.
Hmm.
So we are in a controlled, total controlled environment.
Right.
So this allows us to, manipulate things a bit more
Right.
than people who would have to fight outdoors or in the bush.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
So you alluded to earlier about the different variables that affect moisture.
Yeah.
Location, weapon, uh, families. I'm assuming you mean families. Round head, hatches, sweater.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
is one part I want to talk about as well. Um, there is a variation on controlling moisture based on a family of fowl that you have. Have you seen a difference in that?
Well, that's something you read about too in the history books. The short heel fowl of the northern U.S. were
Hmm.
fought very drawn out and very dry.
Hmm.
Of course, that's something we'll never know for sure because
Right.
it's many years ago, but
Right.
that's what was written in the books. And I tend to breed more on straight fowl,
Okay.
and I think the straight comb fowl perform better towards the dry side, towards the empty side.
Hmm.
I also am a long knife fighter, so we don't go very extreme like they do in the U.S. or other
Exactly.
areas. I try not to go very extreme,
Okay.
just slightly in one direction, right? So as far as I said, I put my roosters in the air conditioning in the farm and
Mhm.
at the cockpit.
Okay.
And if I'm gonna fight at the cockpit with no air conditioning, I won't point my chickens as long. I'll rest them shorter.
Oh, you will, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So
Ah,
like if it's a nice air conditioned pit, I'm gonna keep them 2 days in my cock house in the aircon. But if it's a hack fight type pit, I'm only gonna do it a day.
wow. That's the first I have heard
Yeah,
of the
that's one. I don't I don't go as extreme if the conditions
control.
are tougher,
Okay.
controlled. Yeah, if you can't control your environment, I won't go as extreme. And as far as devices, air conditioner, I got the little hygrometer, is that it's called, to monitor the humidity and the temperature.
Mhm.
I go for 65% to maybe, that's good. 65 is about perfect. That's what I
Okay.
want. And but give or take 10, I don't, it doesn't matter to me really. But most of the year where I am at, outdoor, if I leave the chickens outdoors, it's about 80 to 90% humidity. And then
Mhm.
stag season, the rain comes, it's, you can go to 100,
Right. Right.
right? And as they say, if the uh, leans towards the more wet side, the birds won't pass as quickly.
Hmm.
That's something often written about, and but I don't know who takes the time to record and prove it. Right? We don't.
Right.
We don't. We don't really prove things in this sport. We just tend to
Right.
believe and
Right.
practice, right? But so that's another thing. Historically, they'll tell you that if there's a cold front or if there's rain, they're going to hold their feed because the rooster doesn't know if there's going to be food the next day, so they'll
Hmm.
pass slower.
Hmm.
That's the logic behind that,
Right.
right? Right. And okay, so
I think so. Let
what
me ask
else?
you a few questions about that. You said that if it's not a temperature controlled um, pit that you're competing in, you would rest them shorter. So meaning
I,
that you'll leave them
I
out.
won't dry them out as much.
So you'll leave them outside longer instead of bringing them
I
in the
still have a
cockpit.
cock house, but I won't put them in the aircon. I'll put
Got
them
it.
in a fly pen instead of the pointing stall. Right, leave them
Okay.
out more. And
Because you want them to stay acclimated to
because
the outside
especially for the
temperature.
hack fight, we acclimated to the outside temperature, they may need a little more moisture because the line going up to the fight is longer. We
Okay.
have to match them by hand in the morning,
Okay.
so that takes a lot out of them too, right? So they need more body, more build for that type of competition.
Mm.
So I fight in the hack fight, which is the lower level. I fight in the big derbies, which is the highest level. I do both.
Mm-hmm.
So slight variations for the differences in competition, I guess. Yeah.
Mm.
And I feed dry feed mostly in my point I limit my water intake. My Rooster's water intake is monitored, more than limited. It's monitored. Yeah.
Oh, so that's a big
I've heard a
difference.
lot of people who like to leave the water in front of them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd never leave the water in front of them. I feel here in the Philippines, they'll tend to drink it every time, at
Mm,
least with me.
mm,
Now, I've seen people give them all the water they want and still win the Derby. So it's really personal preference and experience and knowing your bloodline. So, gonna sound like a broken record, but that's really the way it is. And with the people listening, it's gonna come down to you experimenting and finding what will work for you.
mhm.
What I say may not apply. What somebody else may not apply. Maybe something what I say and something what the other guys. You have
Right,
to find your own way in this sport. That's the truth.
right.
You can only rely so much on information from others. But if you don't go out and compete yourself, you'll never find out for yourself. You can read all the books. Me, I have all the magazines from 1910 to
Mhm,
2010. I read all of them as a kid.
mhm.
And yeah, you know a lot. But what from in the end, you analyze what you learned, what you read, how much of that can be applied to the pit. It's not much. The
It's not
magazines are this
much.
high. You'll be lucky. You'll be lucky to apply this much because there's really no proof of what these guys wrote.
Right.
It's
And
so you really can't tell. So the only way to prove it is to go out and fight and prove your methods yourself.
right.
That's the truth. Win or lose,
Win or lose.
right? I think so because you can get to these magazines and you'll get a keep from 1960 and you'll apply it today.
Mhm,
Are the NBA teams using the playbook from the 1960s? It's different. The game changes, right? So you
mhm.
have to go with the flow. Go with you get your basics from the history, but then you just gotta find your own way. And you have to stick with it. You can't keep switching methods too. You'll never find your way doing that.
Right.
So you have to tweak it slowly till you get your process
Formula.
your yeah till you make your own creep, your own procedure.
Mhm.
And yeah, sometimes it'll work better than other times. I fought two derbies last week. I won one and I went one win, three losses in the other. Did the
What?
same thing, same birds. Yeah, so that's how this sport is, right?
Exactly. And
I
I'm
went three. I win the derby on Wednesday, three straight. On Saturday, I win one, lose three. Lost three in a row too. I'll win the last one.
wow. So,
Different time, everything's different, right?
yep.
And touching on that, with the modern times now, we have Facebook and YouTube and all these reels, 30-second clips, and people
Mhm,
are taking information from 30-second clips
mhm,
and applying it to their keep,
mhm.
and that's gonna mess you up too.
Mm.
Yep. So in reality, we can share information, help other people, but if you don't go out and fight, you won't be able to find the procedure yourself.
Mm.
You just have to go out and do it. If not, you're just gonna be
A
a
person with a
keyboard
bunch.
cocker, so they say, right?
Well, yeah, a person with a bunch of knowledge in your head, but don't know how to apply any of the knowledge. And then if you apply the knowledge that you learn, you'll realize that a lot of it's not even applicable to your situation in this day and time. So it
Yeah.
sounds good that you got the answer to everything when you're on social media because every question that pop up, you got to answer because you read a book, you talk to an old timer. But at the end of the day, if you try to apply the advice that you just gave that person, it may not even work. So the only way that person is going to know if it work or don't work,
Most of the time, it won't.
exactly. You said most of the time it doesn't work, right? And I agree. I so agree. I so agree. Um, and like I say, this part is so important because you just sharing the concept, in my opinion, is going to be more effective than just techniques because I get a lot of messages and because they know I have access to guys like yourself and many others, and they always said, "Hey, what does he do?" What and I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter, man. Like you got to understand a concept so you can come up with your own formula. You can't copy what Tonio does. You know, they seen a lot of your clips. So I've been getting a lot of messages referring to a lot of the clips from your interview. And it's like, a bunch of redundant questions. And I keep giving them the same identical answer. And like, listen, understand the concept, but don't focus so much on Tonio's technique, because Tonio's technique applies to his area, his location, his family of birds, and also his deep knowledge of his own families. And that's the part I think many of them don't take in consideration. They go buy some birds, they have them for 3 or 4 years. They haven't spent a lot of time with them, just throwing feed and filling up water cups and worming them regularly, but they haven't felt them in their hands many times. And I'm giving you a real life example.
Yeah.
So if you can share with us some techniques that guys use to add moisture and to take away moisture, I think will also be helpful.
Well, adding moisture is mostly feeding a wet feed, giving water to your chicken, feeding fruit, pecking them on fruit, boiled egg. These are some of the most common ways, the common practices. Adding moisture day of fight would be pecking on a fruit or boiled egg.
Mm-hmm.
To take away moisture, you'd be, of course, withdrawing the moisture, feeding a dry pellet.
Okay.
Some people like to give them the orange juice.
Okay.
Air conditioning draws out the moisture.
Okay.
Dehumidifier.
Okay.
Yeah, there are many ways, and as I will say time and time again, everyone has a different way of doing it with the same intention and the same result
Right.
in mind, right? So a lot of the things I mentioned, I do not do.
Okay. You do not do.
Yeah, I'm just being clear with everyone. I
Okay.
don't do a lot of those things. I do use a dehumidifier
Mm-hmm.
certain times of the year, not
Mm-hmm.
all year round.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't like to feed too much on fight day, but in the Philippines we have the benefit of knowing the schedule of every fight, so we can estimate, right? But I'm not one of those guys who likes to keep pecking my rooster.
Mm.
I do not like doing that, and I do not get the desired results when I do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So tell me this: do you determine the wet or dry of a rooster from the feel of the rooster or from his droppings?
Droppings and feel both.
Okay.
Uh, Further out, we'll go by feel. By fight day, we're going to go by droppings.
And what are you
Right.
looking for in the droppings to determine if they're too wet, too dry, or around where you're looking for them to be?
Well, it's the textbook thing. I'm looking for the little splatter of paint with the bubbles
Mm-hmm.
empty, right? That's what I want
Mm-hmm.
with my birds. Some people like a more solid dropping. We call that here ice cream, and you can pick that up and throw it against the wall. That's good too. I've had,
So you have
can't,
had positive results with both?
yes, because I'm not gonna get the birds 100% every time, right? I don't want a very loose dropping, like a diarrhea looking dropping. That's a disaster,
Okay.
right? Or sometimes there's the wet dropping with semi-solid in between. Nah, I don't
Mhm.
like that one either.
And what would you say that one would be? The solid in between and a little bit of wet.
There's charts on Google you can find. I don't really go by
Oh,
those things, but they all got a scientific name, and some guy who can't win puts it in a book, right? So you just gotta know it and you see it. I'll tell you what, if you take your rooster out of the box and you put him in the drop pen and he drops right away, that is a very good sign for me
okay.
that your chicken's coming to point. If it takes him a long while to drop, that means that's concerning to me. Most of the shows where I do score well, even 2 days out, they're dropping quick,
Mm,
right? That means they're moving. They're moving, right? The
right.
system's moving. I think, right? Yeah.
Right. Right.
So just on experience and watching and fighting a lot and Usually, the guys who do good in this game are the observant people, very observant. You have to be
Hmm.
observant
Hmm.
and have a good memory for when the
Or
situation comes up again.
right,
Right? Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Um, so you said earlier that you monitor, you don't limit, but you monitor their water intake. And I know you said
Yes.
some guys don't monitor it and they do just as well. But you say you
Yes.
like to monitor their water intake. What do
A
you mean
monitor.
by that?
Eventually, I'll control it too. Right? Not limit, but uh, if I see they're drinking a lot, it may be a sign that they're not feeling too good.
Hmm.
Although I won't leave the water in front of them because I don't trust them either. I think they'll eat and drink to their heart's content. Just
Uh-huh.
me,
Uh-huh.
but uh, I will cut back on the water as I get closer to the fight.
Hmm.
But depending on how much I fed, is how much water I'll give him too.
Gotcha.
There's a relation between that. Yeah,
And the feed that you're feeding them, is it wet or dry?
I go dry
You go dry. And do you feed one time a day or two times a day?
2 times a day.
Uh, is that a result of experience or is it just something like tradition?
It's luxury.
Oh, luxury. Okay.
We are fortunate here in the Philippines that we
Okay.
have we have a whole team working for us with the chickens,
Right.
and if I'm not there, someone is there. There's the chicken. The chickens are monitored
All day.
from when they wake up till they go to sleep.
Got you.
There's never a time they're left alone. So that's a very big luxury that we have here, which I understand is not available in other countries, right?
Right.
Everyone's got to. I've seen roosters that are fed once a day that I would say they're even healthier than the 2 times a day chickens
Mm.
because they're used to processing so much feed,
Right.
right? So it's like I find that impressive too. Like, wow, this bird can pass a whole sausage can worth of feed.
Right.
So, right? So that's something too. The roosters that are raised on twice a day and once a day, you'll see pointing them out is different because I've had a lot of experience with imported roosters too from all over,
Right.
and there's an effect on a twice a day, once a day. You ask the person you got the chickens from if they eat twice or once a day.
And do you try to stick to that?
No, I will just keep it in mind. I
Oh.
just feel that these once a day roosters can pass feed very fast compared to
Oh.
a twice a day chicken.
And you don't want them to pass the feed too fast?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
The goal is to want them to pass the feed.
Okay.
I don't like chickens holding feed. To me, they won't cut. They won't show sharp.
Right.
But I've seen people who win very big derbies over and over again, and they use the little point feed method. But I have had no luck doing that. So I
You
just stick to
haven't,
what
huh?
I've had luck with.
Huh. Let's just move really quick to carbo loading because we already talked about empty and moisture control. So let's talk about carbo loading. Is it something that you practice? Uh, and what are some of the methods that you may have seen, and maybe some of the ingredients that you may have seen being used in the Philippines?
So again, historically, we are taught by the books to carbo load,
Hmm.
but I think there's a trend here in the Philippines moving away from it. I think
Hmm.
it's not as popular as it once was.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people feeding a pellet in the point or feeding the yard feed ground up.
Hmm.
There's many ways to go at it. In general, I am still carbo loading, but not to an extreme level.
Hmm.
But I will shift to a corn-based point feed. Yeah, I do that. Before, the carbo loading here was what they call the Driscoll method,
Okay.
which involved a lot of brown rice, barley, and a wet cooked feed at night, and then some popcorn And then that's the what's the concept of carbo loading is they're going to get energy from all those carbs.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you look at what the doctors and stuff say nowadays is carbs is all sugar and leads to a crash,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can think about that too. Are your chickens crashing? You're feeding them all this energy 2-3 days out. He's not fighting till then.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to hurt them or help them?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, these are human doctors. We don't have them studying fighting cocks because our sport's illegal, right?
Right.
So there is no clear answer to whether it's the correct way or not. We
Right.
just,
Try it.
again, you just try, you believe, and you try and prove to yourself which is going to work,
Right.
right?
Ha-
Yeah.
Have you had opportunity to talk to guys who kind of shifted their method? Have you had an opportunity to talk to them and maybe get some feedback saying, hey, have you seen a difference, since you moved away from the carbo loading? Have you had an opportunity to talk to anybody about that?
Maybe I haven't had, no, I haven't really had that conversation, but I've seen it with my own eyes on like what people are feeding. I just, keep it to myself too. I don't want to,
Right.
you do you, I do me type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But that's some, I got some people in mind who I'll talk to about it. I never thought of thinking, I never thought about talking about it till now. We'll put it that way. Yeah. I don't know. One good thing about uh, maybe those cooked feeds is they're soft. They'll pass it quickly,
Hmm.
right? But then so are the pellets. The pellets get passed quick too. So I don't know. I can only speak for what I do.
Right. So
Yeah.
tell me this. You, you know, do you feed on show day or do you don't give them any feed? I think we looked at one old interview video where I think Curtis Blackwell says something about he stopped feeding on Thursday if he's going to show on Saturday or something like that. Again, like I said, I just thought it was extreme watching that interview,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
like, God, dog, like wow. But you know what I
I don't
mean?
know. I don't know. I, I mean, I feed. I think I feed a lot less than the people I fight against. I won't feed maybe my first couple of birds
Right,
day of fight, or maybe just give them a couple of pecks.
right.
But I know the schedule, right? So the late fights, they're gonna get feed,
Mm,
right? But there's a certain amount for me, which is my maximum. I won't give more than a certain amount
got you,
because
got you.
I think they won't pass it. And I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not a fan of the point feeding, pecking them every hour. For me, I believe the less you give the chicken, the less you have to do to him.
Yep.
So you can just leave him in the box, let him sort it out himself. Yeah.
And do you think by keeping them in keep stalls and not keep stalls, it makes a difference in how they pass feed as well?
Oh, what on fight day?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course. They're not moving around when they're in the keep stall, and you got them blacked out. They're
Mm-hmm.
resting,
Mm-hmm.
and then from time to time, you turn on the lights, bring them out, and they're gonna drop.
Right.
And if they drop right away, once again, that's a good sign. I've seen the videos in Mexico where they keep them open, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've I haven't experienced that, so I wouldn't know how to answer. I'd assume they would pass much quicker being active the whole time.
Right.
I don't know how much they're feeding or what their conditions are there though. I don't have any experience in that, so
Right.
I wouldn't know. I guess in the U.S. people were back when I'd go in the legal days.
Yeah.
Everyone had a cock house and they were keeping him inside. I never saw people keeping him day of Derby on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I asked you that because one of the guys we interviewed, which is in Colombia, um,
Yes.
Nandi talked about how he just got better results and not keeping them in stalls, but actually just leaving them out kind of like in a fly pen. He said he just got different results, but it just goes back to your point. Like you said, it's just like a broken record. You have to find what works for you in your situation. Um, and I asked that because I think a lot of these guys never took in consideration of trying it any other way than the way that they were told they had to do it, which was put them in a keep stall and black them out. Like they're doing that, and not saying it doesn't work, because in
Yeah.
many cases it does. But my point is, they're doing it not because they experienced it, various different ways. They're just doing it that way because that's the way they were taught to do it. So that was kind of my whole point.
Yes. I know people who don't really black him out at the farm,
Hmm.
keep him loose, and then the first real blackout days at the pit. I've seen that. I've heard of that.
Okay.
A lot of it maybe has to do with stress. Some roosters take stress better than others,
Right.
right? You said Colombia. That's a different type of rooster, Spanish
Yep.
rooster.
Yep.
I have zero experience with Spanish roosters.
Hmm.
I remember you posted a video of the pit in Puerto Rico
Yeah.
where they're kept in the plexiglass.
All
And I
day for
was
hours.
wondering, like, yeah, and there's a lot of droppings. So I was like, man, these birds eat a lot. And then I was like, is anyone wiping the droppings? That's just my
Right. Right.
my concern, right? Yeah.
And that's funny that you say that, because like you can turn your birds in at 10:30 in the morning, and they might not show until 10:30 at night, and you
Yeah.
never get to touch them. Once they turned in, they turned in. So guys see the droppings in there, like, oh my God, those birds are not going to be ready. Look at all those droppings. And I'm like, if you didn't wipe that drop pin and you put them in that drop pin at 10:30 in the morning, and you didn't wipe that drop pin floor until 10:30 at night, how much droppings would you think you'll see on the mat?
Oh,
And the guy was like, you know what? I really don't know, because I actually never left him in a drop pin that long and wiped it. I said, exactly. And you don't know, you might have twice as much droppings in there, or you might not have it. I mean, I ain't gonna say not any, you'll have some, but it just really depends. But um the situation here, again, like in the Philippines, is so much different, because you don't get to touch them, you don't get to peck them, you don't get to do anything. You turn
yes.
them in at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, and it might be 11 o'clock at night before he show. So no water, no feed, no pecking, no nothing. Um, and the guys do go in there and wipe, but again, it just depends on how they staffing is, how many roosters they have, how many people back there working. But yeah, they do go back there and wipe. So they're not going to stand in the original
Yeah.
dropping that they dropped at 10:30 in the morning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's why I say it goes. You explaining a concept, I think, is the most important thing than just explaining techniques, because a lot of the stuff that y'all guys do wouldn't even work here, because we don't even have access to the birds. So once we
Yes.
turn them in, and guys like, oh, give him a peck of this or give him a little of that, let him peck on some fruit, give him a couple pellets, feel his body, so you can make adjustments where there is no feeling the body, there is no pecking, there is no nothing. So, um, but I think the concept can help, because it can put stuff in your mind and maybe try different things. Some of the things that's common here is they'll use popcorn, they'll feed some on feed day, they'll get corn in the bottom of their feed cup. Most of the guys here don't take their water away. And
Oh,
we're in a Caribbean climate, a tropical climate. And I see birds that cut like crazy, um, and been on water the whole time. But then again, I see some that had water the whole time and can't cut their way out of a paper bag. So um, it's just really interesting. And nobody here has a closed cock house. There is no closed cock houses here. Everything is kind of
no.
open air. They might have shelter because of the sun, but it's going to be open. Ain't nobody here has an air conditioned cock house. Nobody's blacking out roosters. And as you can see, when these birds show, they can cut. They can cut. So it's just really interesting. Like you say, nobody took it back to the scientific to try to understand it. But when you go in there, you seeing birds finish a fight in 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So it's not no lucky shots. They literally going in there and they cutting them down. Like, man, that bird has never been in a cock house, has never been blacked out, been sitting back behind that plexiglass for 5 hours. You know what I'm saying? Like, how is that bird able to do that? So I think, it goes back to the solid points that you made. Is a whole bunch of variables you got to take in consideration your situation, but the key is you got to go out there and do it. And
Yeah.
there's no shortcut around it. You got to literally go and do it and figure it out.
Yeah, and as you said, that's a completely different weapon and bird.
Yep.
My question is that postisa, they're all going to the neck and head. If they hit to the body, does that
No,
penetrate the
and the
body?
body. That's a big misconception.
Yeah,
If you look at like the whole videos,
yeah,
and then see the birds come out of the pit, their bodies will be busted up just like their head.
bust it up too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
their bodies be busted up, just even back shots and kidney shots. You know, when they get hit across the back, it clearly takes the power
so,
straight at them.
so
You know what I mean?
they're bleeding too. It penetrates.
Oh my God, they're definitely bleeding. And obviously, you know, we can't show any of that on social
Yeah,
media, but you got the vomit, you got the guard, you know, y'all call it a rattle. We don't call it rattle, but you know, we call vomico, where they
yeah.
bubbling up out the mouth, neck shots, head shots, body shots, lung shots, where they get hit straight in the chest and it's done. I mean, they just drop
Interesting.
completely. There's no flapping around or anything. It's like bam, and they just completely drop. So the weapon now that we use that's approved by the government is about a little less than inch. It's about a little less than inch and 3/4. It's between an inch and a half and an inch and 3/4. Um, Before we used to go from an inch, from 1.6, 1.8, and 1.9, but the government went away from the 8 and 9. They said the weapons was too long. They want to stick to the 1.6 because it exposes all parts of the program, from the genetics, the conditioning, and the health. So yeah, so
Interesting.
that's what. But yeah, they get in there, and typically, you know, right now we got a 12-minute time limit. You know, keep going down, 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 down. When I first moved here back in 2012, it was 16 minutes. Now it's down to 12. It went from 16 to 14. Now it's 12. The stags used to fight for 12, and the cocks would fight for 16. But now the stags fight for 10, and the cocks fight for 12. But very rarely, 85% of the shows are finished before the 12 minutes. 85.
And it's plastic weapon.
It's a special kind of plastic. It's not a plastic like a piece of toy. You know,
Yeah.
You know, if you take a toy and you scratch the plastic, you can feel a difference in
Yeah.
different types of plastic. So yeah, it's a special formula that they use, and different
Hard.
spur companies are competing, kind of like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. They're
I
coming
see.
up with their own formulas, and you know what I mean? And it's different formulas for different types of plastic. So yeah, it's not like a plastic toy. That's is not that kind of plastic. You know, it's a special formulated plastic. It doesn't break. There's no breaking. And 85, I don't want to say 90, but I would say about 85 to 87% of the shows will be ended in 5.5 minutes or less. The average show over here is about 4.5 minutes. And I think that's very, very impressive. 4.5 minutes with a Batista on it on their leg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I personally love to hear and educate myself on a lot of the pointing methods, just to understand the concept, not really so much the techniques, but understanding the concept. But I just bang my head up against the wall because I'm like you see guys that feed once a day and win, and guys that feed twice a day and win, guys that have droppings like this and win, and guys that have crazy looking droppings that win. And it's kind of the same thing here in Puerto Rico. It's like, it's very difficult for me to absorb this pointing concept because I'm like, I don't see, you know, we can't really point here. You know, like once they, I mean, that final era, you don't know when your bird is going to show, and you don't know how long he's going to sit back in that box.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then how does something cut like crazy at 11 o'clock at night, and he been in that box since 10:30 that morning?
It's genetics.
Thank you. Exactly.
Hell,
That's the only conclusion I can come to is genetics.
they're proven, right? They can take the stress.
Yep.
The good ones take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Good roosters, you can send them to a bunch of different feeders who'll feed them all different. The rooster's still gonna win.
I'm glad you said that.
It's the other roosters that are harder. Like, oh, only this guy can make those roosters win. There's chickens like that. Chickens
Right.
that can win in anyone's hands, and chickens that can only win in one guy's hand.
You